Welcome to the Wine Zone. I'm Konrad Ejbich and this is Pro and Con. There are about 200 people in the world with the title Master Sommelier. My guest today is John Szabo, one of just 4 Canadians to achieve membership in that exclusive club. John is a wine consultant for Air Canada and some of the major hotels and restaurant groups. He's the lead wine writer for Wine Line website. He's co-owner of a winery in Hungary, this one here. And his most recent claim to fame is his book, Pairing Food and Wine for Dummies. Now, if that isn't enough, John's also a 2nd degree black belt in karate.
3rd degree now.
3rd degree. 3rd degree. Good for you. Got that yesterday. Cheers. Thanks for coming in, John. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, there are many books on wine and food pairings. What's different about yours, besides the yellow cover?
Well, the Dummies series, as you know, is a very popular series. It's very formulaic to a degree, but it's a formula they've been working on for so many years, and they've really, I think, figured out a way to deliver sometimes complex information in a very readable, user-friendly fashion. So, as you said, there are many books on food and wine pairing, but what I've tried to do with this particular book, following the Dummies model, was to present what's pretty complex information at the end of the day, or what can be complex information, in as presentable, easily readable a fashion as I could.
No kidding. Yeah, I love a couple of things. Are the cartoons original? They're cartoons at the head of every chapter.
Those are all original,
quite fun,
done in-house by the publishing company.
And there are these fantastic graphs, for example, just like this, where you have one item in the middle with sweet wine, and you have all the different permutations and combinations. It's just brilliant how you've done that. I think it's really terrific. Now, there's nothing really like it. I've gone through it. I use it all the time when I'm writing up wines and coming up with ideas. I can't get over how many different cuisines you've covered. Virtually everyone. I was looking for sauerkraut. I was looking for Polish foods, and I was looking for Korean things. They're all in there. Everything's in there. It's really great. Now,
actually, there's a good section on Poland. I had a colleague of mine from the Polish Wine Guide in Warsaw helped me out.
Wojciech Bankowski. I know Wojciech. That's great. Yeah, no, it was excellent, and it really covers it well. And then at the end, there's a little section on if you're having such and such a wine, whether it's unoaked Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc, etc. Then here are all the different permutations of foods and how to do it. And then there's the reverse there of 10 really great all-purpose foods.
Mm-hmm.
They'll
go with most wine.
Yeah.
Try one of these dishes. That was really the challenge for me, was trying to come up with as many different ways of approaching this subject. In fact, when Wiley's first contacted me to potentially author this book, I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to be able to fill 384 pages with food and wine pairing advice? You know, it could be as simple as drink what you like with what you like to eat, and everything kind of works out pretty well, but that's not obviously good enough to write a book. Or you can take it to the other extreme where it becomes extremely complicated and you look at sort of molecular level interaction between foods and wines. And I wanted to hit somewhere in the middle, appealing to both, you know, the average day cook who loves to eat, doesn't know so much about wine, and also, you know, fairly high level sommeliers who are looking for a little brush up in some of the latest research on food and wine pairing. So that's why you can pick up the book pretty much in any chapter. You don't have to start from the beginning. You can pick it up, go right to the middle, go right to the element that's of greatest interest to you at that time. You know, what am I cooking tonight? What's a great wine? Or what wine do I have in my cellar? What should I cook tonight? Or really, why do these two things work together in the first place? And you can sort of build your knowledge from whatever direction you want.
Right, and it's not just a book for sommeliers or wine geeks or wine writers. It's a book for anybody, in that you can go anywhere. You could have absolutely no knowledge about wine and food, and really basically improve your drinking and dining experience at any level.
I hope so. I'm particularly proud of those little diagrams that you pointed out, because that was a brainstorming moment. I was, again, trying to figure out another way to render this information that's been done many times before, and I thought, what better way than almost a brain map, you know, a visual reference of literally what would go through my mind if I'm presented a bottle of wine, right, John? You've got a Beaujolais here tonight. What are you going to cook with that?
Right.
And so I start off with the wine style, and I break down the world of wine into manageable categories. Because let's face it, of the millions of wines available, most of them fit into a dozen or so different categories, from light crisp, fresh, juicy red to unoaked white, you know, some basic style categories. So starting from that point of departure, which is the bottle of wine I've been given, what's the direction my mind would take? All right, well, I want something with an equal level of acidity to match the acidity in the wine. What foods have that acidity? And you go out and you build this kind of brain map, this pairing tree, as I call them.
Yeah.
So it's a real helpful visual sort of reference. You don't need to wade through paragraph after paragraph of theory.
Yeah, no, so do you see your job as to teach people about wine or to make them happy? As a sommelier, you're working in a restaurant, in a hotel, in the dining room, somebody says, is your job to teach people about what they should be drinking or just to make them happy with what they want? What do you say to people who are obviously in a wine rut?
Well, I would say categorically that my job is not to teach people, it's to make them happy. What happens after that is up to the individual, and often it leads to a little bit of education, but a sort of passive way of acquiring new knowledge without being taught to. You know, people have a resistance to being taught to. I guess all those difficult years in high school and university has turned people off from education, but first and foremost, people want to enjoy themselves while they're eating and drinking. If I can put them on the right path, and really it's about them, it's never about me, it's never about the sommelier or the server, it's about the guest.
It is about hospitality, not classrooms, right?
Precisely. Now, of course, if a guest were to say to me, John, can you tell me a little bit about this, or why is that a great wine, or why is that a great match, then I'm more than happy to explain the details behind that. But the first question is, well, what do you like to drink? What are you having for dinner tonight? And once you've found out their comfort zone, the style categories in which they're most happy drinking, and that information could be as detailed as, I like Napa cabs, but from the hillsides, not the valley floor. I like the greater structure, or it could be, I like red wine.
Exactly. Now, you just come to the bottom of it. There are rules for pairing that we've used for decades. Red wine with red meat, white wine with white meat. Do you subscribe to any of that?
I do, and I don't. Or rather, there is some logical basis for these basic sort of tenets of food and wine pairing. You shouldn't hold yourself slavishly to them either. But for example, actually, when I was researching the book on red wine and fish in particular, we've been taught that's a no-no. I've had plenty of great bottles of red wine with fish dishes that work beautifully, and I wanted to understand a little bit more, and my research led me to some sort of new discoveries that it really has nothing to do with the oil in fish as was previously believed, or maybe it's partly related to that, but it turns out it's probably more likely related to iron content in the wine.
And calcium in the fish.
Precisely. So there were some Japanese researchers that looked into it. They took samples of wine and they doctored them up with various degrees of iron and then tried it with scallops. Scallops are a notoriously difficult thing to pair with wine, or rather it's a food that very often provokes that unpleasant metallic taste.
Right. And
they discovered that the wines that had no iron, as they had analyzed them, provoked no metallic sensation. In fact, they turned out to be pretty good matches. The wines that had iron in them were the worst pairings, and the wines with no iron that had iron added, again, provoked that same sensation. So the conclusion they drew is that really it's probably due to the iron content in the wine,
right,
and the calcium in the fish.
Right. Now, explain that a little more, in that I have experienced in wine classes people asking me, well, at what point did they add the iron to the wine? And the idea is that the iron's in the soil, and it comes up in the wine.
Right.
Because we're not adding iron to wine and blending it in. It's right there.
I mean, most of the wines I drink are made from pure grapes.
Right.
Pure fermented grape juice.
Me too, whatever I can.
Most of the time, but yes. Now, how that happens, how the vine root system absorbs iron and eventually puts it into the grapes, I don't really know, and I don't think science is quite there yet. But then I took it to that next step, why red wine with fish is generally a no-no. In fact, I contacted George Soleas from the LCBO to talk about some of the chemical analysis of wine, and it turns out that most of the iron that's found in wine comes from the skins of grapes. Because that's where most of the flavor precursors are.
Right, well, yeah, of course, but yeah, it's still coming from the soil. In other words, on a soil where there's no iron in the soil, you're not going to have any in the skins of the grapes.
Right. However, you're far more likely to get iron in a wine with red grapes, than white grapes, because during the winemaking process you soak the red skins with the juice and you extract not only color but tannins and apparently iron and probably other minerals.
Right.
So white wines are generally low iron because there's no skin contact or very little.
Right.
Red wines, if there is iron to be found, you will extract it because you're doing the skin maceration.
Of course.
So it all sort of came together. Why red wine and fish don't usually go together? Well, it has nothing to do with the fact that it's red or that there are tannins. It's to do with iron, and you're most likely to find that in a red wine. So all things being equal, avoid red wine with fish because there's a chance.
May be iron unless you know the wine and you know that it's not from a soil that has lots of iron.
The trouble for a consumer, you can't walk into a shop and look at a bottle and know whether it has iron or not because so many factors that are involved.
Right. At your level, when you study, you don't just study wines, you study regions and soils and winemaking styles and everything. You could probably walk in and say, well, this wine's probably got some iron in that.
Well, I might have an educated guess.
Okay, that's good.
But I'm still surprised so often with food and wine pairing, things that you would never imagine would work turn out to be pretty brilliant matches, or at least not disasters.
Right. So when you're planning a dinner party, do you choose the foods first or the wines first? And how do you come up with a menu?
I flip-flop back and forth. In the book, I describe myself more as a wino, and by that I mean somebody who would either at home or in a restaurant choose the wine first.
Right.
Because I'm less flexible about the wines I enjoy drinking. Forget about tasting and reviewing. When I drink, there's a certain category that I enjoy drinking, and I don't like to go so far outside that. So I'll make sure I'm drinking a wine I like, and then I will backtrack and find a dish on the menu that probably will work pretty well with that. And I'll do the same at home.
I can understand, because the other thing, of course, is that you can't change the wine. What comes out of the bottle is what you get. Whereas with the food, you can subtly alter the taste with whatever, with spices, with salt, with lemon, etc., to make it fit the wine better. Whereas you can't work the other way around.
You can play around with temperature and decanting and a couple of other things, but essentially the wine is the wine on the day that you open it.
Yeah.
And I'm flexible with food. I eat just about everything. I have no food allergies or sensitivities. I have a broad palette of things that I love to eat. So I'm flexible with the more so with the food than the wine.
What's the biggest mistake that people make when they're ordering wine in a restaurant?
I think probably not communicating effectively enough with the server. And in fact, I have a chapter in the book on how to order wine in a restaurant, or how to get the most out of your server, because there are tricks of the trade for diners in order to make sure that the sommelier is guiding them in the right direction. And the basic premise is give them as much information as possible.
Right.
Don't just walk into a restaurant, look at the list, point to the one that's about 3 or 4 rows down from the lowest price point, and hope to get something good. That's rolling the dice.
Tell them what you like. Tell them what you're intending to eat. Tell them how much you want to pay. Don't be shy about that. You're saying
people are very.
It's a team effort. What you're saying is it's a team effort, and be part of the team.
Well, if you don't tell me anything, then how can I possibly read your mind? If I'm a very, very talented sommelier, I can pick up all the clues, or maybe some clues that I would need to match you with the right wine. But hey, make my life easier. Right. I'm going to say, John, I like crisp red wines. I like oaky, buttery Chardonnays. I'm willing to spend $50. I've had California before. What else do you have that's similar?
Sure.
Introduce me to something new.
Okay. Now, wine lists in restaurants have become mysterious, even for a knowledgeable guy like me, of late, because restaurants are seeking out products that simply you can't buy in liquor stores. So what's your best advice to someone who's in a restaurant that doesn't have a sommelier and they're trying to navigate a list of unfamiliar wines?
Well, the same could be said of food menus too. I mean, chefs are getting very creative these days, and they're sourcing ingredients that you don't find in your supermarket. So if you're willing to put your trust in the chef who's creating a dish for you with things that you're not familiar with, why not give the sommelier or the manager or the wine buyer the same sort of, at least, chance one time? Probably, hopefully, if it's a good place, they've curated a list of products that will match really well with the menu. So at that point, you try and engage a conversation with your server, and you can always tell when a server knows what they're talking about or is making stuff up on the spot, and that's just basic human interaction. You can generally pick up on whether they're trustworthy or not. If they're trustworthy, try out their suggestions. At the end of the day, what are you losing? We're not talking thousands of dollars here. It's $40, $50, $60, whatever you're comfortable spending on a bottle of wine. If you don't like it, send it back, try something else, or you pay and you don't return to the restaurant. I think it's quite simple.
Right. Now tell me about your wine here. This is the wine that's made in Hungary by you and your partner. Your partner's a winemaker.
That's right.
Right?
His name is János, so that's why it's J&J Eger.
John and
János.
Yeah. Which one's the backward one?
Well, the label was designed actually to look, first of all, like a wine chalice.
It does.
But it also
with the wording underneath.
With the wording, yes, with the little pedestal formed by the name of the company. But also to kind of as a throwback to the bull's blood of Eger. If you look at it, you can just imagine.
Oh, I never thought of that. I saw the wine glass right away, but I never thought about the bull's horns.
You can read it both ways. But this is a project I started back in 2003. Bought a very small parcel of land and 3 different parcels totaling 1 hectare, 2.5 acres. So really very small as the world of wine goes. And I found János, my eventual partner, through a connection in Tokaj.
Right, I've met János.
That's right.
Yes, I met him in Tokaj.
Through a cousin of his, we were sort of introduced, and really I was looking for a way of getting back to Hungary regularly and seeing my family, but more importantly, the experience of growing grapes and making wine. Because as a wine critic, as you know, I think it's critical to know a little bit about the winemaking process, and the experience of doing it hands-on is irreplaceable. You can't get that from a book. So it certainly wasn't a profit venture. Fortunately I haven't lost any money.
Right.
But for me it was more about the experience of getting my hands dirty and trying to make a wine that represented this little corner of the world, which I think makes pretty good wine.
But it is available here. I've seen it at Donna Dewar's restaurant,
yes.
Mildred's Temple Kitchen. I've seen it there on the list.
It's available in quite a few of the restaurants.
Tell me about the wine. Tell me what would be the ideal food to match with it. If I come across this wine in a restaurant, what would I match with it?
Well,
what would be the range?
The style of this wine, I usually describe it as some kind of triangulation between Northern Rhone Syrah, a little peppery, spicy, sometimes Loire Valley Cab Franc. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the tobacco flavors, and then Dolcetto from Northern Italy. If you look at that, those are all pretty obscure references. But imagine a wine in that.
That's why you need the book.
But the acidity is lively. It's bright. It's mouth-watering. The tannins are pretty fine. They're dusty, but certainly not big, chewy tannins. And the flavor range is kind of spicy red and a little bit of black fruit and tobacco. So whatever you would match a peppery Syrah with, or a lighter style of Cabernet Franc would be ideal. I like to go with, an obvious regional pairing would be like a paprikash, a veal paprikash would be ideal, with the spice of the paprika matching the spice of the Kekfrankos, which is the grape variety. And then you want a little bit of either salt, fat, or protein, preferably all 3.
Blood.
Right, just to soften. You want to take the edge off the acidity, polish off those tannins, and for me the 3 main elements in food that do that are salt, which is a great tannin buffer, protein, which, like in a deep dish like the paprikash, the veal meat itself, the protein in that actually binds with the tannin in the wine and creates these longer chain molecules that are perceived as softer. And then fat, and we usually add a little dollop of sour cream, and then there's just the richness of the meat itself. But the fat also acts as a buffer between tannin and acid in the perception of the wine. Right,
but it's got iron in it, so it's not a fish wine.
This is actually not bad with fish, but I wouldn't
specific
say
types,
not sea bass, but tuna, for example.
Okay,
would be great.
Yes.
Or charred salmon works quite well. Oysters probably not so much.
Yeah. That's great, fantastic. There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Konrad. Thank you for having me.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you. And go and get the book. Don't miss it. It's a fantastic book. You will not regret it. And come back again and see us when we have some more interesting guests. Thanks. Bye.